What's up, everybody? Derek Anderson, the DA. All right, check this out. So I think we all can safely say and agree that Star Wars as a franchise is in a very dark place at this moment, all right? It's in a very dark place, and right now, every television show, whether you like Disney, Star Wars, or not, every television show, every movie that comes out, there's a big question mark next to it, and a lot of people aren't even going to check for it. They're not even going to give it a chance. Now, you guys know me. I'm a Star Wars fan. I will die on Star Wars Hill, okay? I've said that many, many times. That is my number one go-to franchise, and I want Star Wars to be great again. However, the people that's running it over there at Lucasfilm have no idea what they're doing, and that's the biggest problem. And so that's where statements like this start to come out, where you see on Screen Rant, X-Men First Class Director wants to reboot Star Wars after 46 years. Matthew Vaughn rebooted the X-Men franchise, and now he's revealed he believes the time is ripe to do the same with Star Wars. But is he right? No, he is wrong. He is absolutely wrong, and I'm going to tell you why he's wrong. The biggest problem with Star Wars is, again, it's Lucasfilm, it's Kathleen Kennedy, it's all of their creators not understanding what the franchise means to the fans, not understanding the franchise at all, in my opinion. You know, if you don't understand what George Lucas's original vision was, then you're off base automatically. Now you're just making content for fans to consume. That's really what you're doing. That's what a reboot would be. A reboot would just be more content. Content from people that don't really understand the fan base. They don't understand the franchise. They all got like a narrow, kind of really super narrow interpretation of what Star Wars means to them, right? Like Matthew Vaughn is going to explain what it means to him. And then you got Dave Filoni, this is what Star Wars means to me. You got Rian Johnson, this is what I saw Star Wars as. Everybody can have their own interpretations, and that's fine. But they have no ideas, no good ones anyway, of what Star Wars means to the larger scope, to the larger fan base, to the galaxy, if you want to call it that. And that's the problem with the idea of rebooting this thing. Let's go ahead and check out this article. So it says, Matthew Vaughn, director of X-Men First Class, wants to reboot the Star Wars franchise because he believes the focus should be on the Skywalker family. However, a Star Wars reboot may face backlash from fans who view it as disrespectful to George Lucas's original vision for the franchise. Instead of a reboot, expanding the Star Wars universe with diverse stories and concepts like Ahsoka and Andor would be a more creative and appealing choice. Yeah, see, let me address this first part right here again. What Star Wars means to certain individuals. Okay, so for Matthew Vaughn, he believes the focus is on the Skywalker family. That's what he thinks. He thinks Star Wars is the Skywalkers, and if you get away from the Skywalkers, it's no longer Star Wars, and that's where everything is going off the rails. That's how Matthew Vaughn believes. Now, earlier this week, there was a tweet from Star Wars Theory that kind of has that same line of thinking as to what Star Wars is, right? He said in his tweet that Andor is not Star Wars. It's a world-building show. It doesn't compete with actual Star Wars, Jedi, Sith, the Force, etc. It's just a good sci-fi show, nothing more. Now, I had responded with this particular take, okay? I said Star Wars must have one of four things to make it Star Wars: Jedi, Sith, Rebellion, the Empire. If one of the four is present, it's Star Wars. That's how I look at it, all right? Star Wars has always had one of those four elements, and you can dive deep into any of those elements. Like Andor, for instance, it dove deep into the Rebellion, it dove deep into the Empire. You know, not so much about the Jedi and the Sith, not so much about the Force, but to me, that's like kind of the crux of what Star Wars is in terms of its four, elements. The four elements like, earth, wind, fire, and air. It's kind of like, okay, you need these four elements in order to make something Star Wars, in order to have Star Wars. If you're diving in to any of these four, in my opinion, you're doing a Star Wars show. So for Matthew Vaughn to say, well, the focus should just be on the Skywalker family, like this is completely disregarding like the entirety of the Star Wars franchise. The Star Wars franchise just didn't focus on the Skywalker family. It focused on the Rebellion. The very first film barely had anything about like Jedi and Sith or any of that in there, all right? It wasn't strictly about the Skywalker family. We only dealt with really one Skywalker, and then, of course, later down the line, we understood, oh, Leia's a Skywalker, Vader was Anakin, but, we already had that kind of, pieced together after Empire. But ultimately, it's not just about the Skywalker family. It's the wars, okay? Star Wars is about the Rebellion versus the Empire. And even if you want to translate it into the sequel trilogy, it was the Resistance versus the First Order. There's some sort of a resistance or rebellion. There's some sort of an empire or order that's kind of controlling things. And that's the background for all of the Jedi and Sith stuff that's going on, all right? That stands at the forefront, which I agree. Yeah, there's going to be a focus necessarily on the Jedi, but to just say, well, you know, this stuff isn't Star Wars because it doesn't have certain things or certain elements, I think you're just disregarding everything about the franchise and you're not digging deep enough. All right. You're not going into the things that really bring Star Wars fans together. All of it is important. Yeah. And then it says, you know, a reboot may face backlash. No kidding. No kidding. It's going to face backlash. Nobody's going to accept that. All right. Star Wars is a ongoing story. You know, and what they're doing now is going back and kind of filling in some of the gaps, but nevertheless, it's an ongoing story. You got to go further. You got to push it into the future. You can't just sit back and rehash the same stuff over and over again. You see, to me, that's what's disrespectful about George Lucas's original vision. It's just this constant rehashing of the Star Wars franchise. Yeah, we're just going to keep telling the same story. You know, we're going to use the same characters. We're going to tell new stories with these characters. You know, let novels fill in the gaps. You guys move it forward, you know. Let the novels and the animated stuff fill in the gaps. The live action stuff, that should be all about moving the content forward, you know, going forward in history. And then, yeah, instead of a reboot, you know, give us different stories, all right? Give us new concepts. Ahsoka and Andor. Like, I thought that Ahsoka had a good story at its core, and it just told it badly, very badly. And Andor, again, I think that's the best thing that they've done since Empire, and I just want them to keep going. All right, you got that, but what y'all need to do is move forward, move beyond the Skywalker saga. That's really what needs to happen. So in the article, it says, Kingsman director Matthew Vaughn has already spoken about a full Star Wars reboot, telling Screen Rant he'd find the idea exciting. He's now built upon this in an interview with Josh Horowitz, explaining this is the only way he'd ever do a Star Wars movie. Now, and I don't mind Kingsman, you know, the content there. I think Matthew Vaughn is a good director. I liked his Kick-Ass. I liked X-Men First Class. I like the Kingsman series. You know, all of that stuff is fine, but I don't think he's right for Star Wars. And just him saying this stuff really solidifies it for me. For me, doing a Star Wars movie is to play with the characters that I love. You see, they're not interested in doing anything unique. They want to play in the sandbox. That's what Rian Johnson was talking about. I just want to play with these characters. I just want to play like action figures in the sandbox instead of creating things. You know, you're supposed to be a filmmaker. You're supposed to be going out there to create, not just to sit back and play with your toys, all right? That's the stuff I don't enjoy. In his view, Star Wars is the Skywalker family, and he believes that's what Lucasfilm has gotten wrong with their desire to expand the franchise. Bond. Do you mind Bond? You asked me who's going to play the next Wolverine. Why are these characters so hollow that from 1977, you can't redo it for a new audience? You know, there was a point in time when I thought, yeah, they probably will reboot Star Wars. But the more and more I've thought about that idea, I'm thinking that's just a bad idea. It's a really stupid idea, as a matter of fact. Instead of just saying, you know what, George Lucas took a very simple concept. You know, simple concept, and he expanded it into a mythology, and he created memorable characters. And that's what these cats over at Lucasfilm should be doing, you know? Instead of just churning out content for people to consume, Star Wars fans consume. You want more Star Wars? Here you go. Instead of doing that, you know, dig back into the, you know, the simple mythology that George Lucas was trying to tell. You know, he took these very simple mythological elements. He combined them with his own kind of storytelling style. Obviously, he borrowed from, you know, Westerns, and he borrowed from Akira Kurosawa, you know, and then, of course, he used the hero's journey, the Heroes of a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell. He kind of blended all of that together, you know, and he came out with Star Wars. You know, that's where Star Wars was, and he really focused on character. He did an excellent job of understanding character. That's one thing that George Lucas got. Where all these guys, they just see the spectacle. They just see, oh, lightsabers and ships and this and that and the Skywalker's family. And it's like, well, you can create your own Skywalker family, or you can create your own situation like the Skywalker family, Matt Vaughn. You don't have to just dive back into what George Lucas was doing. This is where Hollywood has been failing, is because they just keep like holding on to these franchises instead of going out there and making new stuff. I got a video coming up about that I've been working on. But yeah, it's just like, hey, get away from the franchise like mindset and just start thinking, you know, what if I was making Star Wars for the very first time, building upon what George Lucas had already done? What if you were like taking this franchise and you need to move it 200 years out? What would you do? You know, like that's what I keep saying, that Star Wars needs to go 200 years into the future. Get away from the Skywalker saga. Number one, you keep screwing it up, all right? You're damaging all the legacy characters with your bullshit. Get away from that. Expand beyond all of the stuff that we've ever known about Star Wars. Go 200 years into the future. Yes, it still needs to have Jedi, Sith, Rebels, and Empire. Otherwise, it's not Star Wars. But as I've said before, that's where you need to go, okay? I honestly, if I ran the zoo, you know, I would say, hey, George, let me sit down with you for about, half hour to an hour. And just get your ideas, Let me kick it with you. What are your ideas? What happens 200 years after Luke Skywalker is gone? What happens after that, Give me the layout. Is his family still around? Is his family not still? What's going on? That's what I would do, And then just pick George's brain and then run with that, Obviously, there's going to be some things that you keep, some things that you don't keep, whatever. But you would just take George Lucas's mind and say, okay, George, he ain't got much longer left. Let's go ahead and talk to this cat and see, hey, what's the next era for Star Wars look like in your opinion? If you're a creative person, you can take that and run with it and do something instead of, let's just reboot it, Again, that just shows the lack of creativity, the absolute creative birth, the absolute creative dearth in Hollywood is on full display with this guy's comments. There's an undeniably solid basis to Vaughn's argument. At the heart, the Star Wars franchise is indeed the Skywalker saga, a truth the movies themselves have struggled to contend with. It's the real reason Rey became Rey Skywalker at the end of the sequel trilogy. Yeah, because they don't know anything else to do. They had no good ideas of what to do with this character. Oh, let's just make her a Skywalker and that's it, okay? That's trash, man. I'm sorry. That's just trash writing. For all that's the case, though, the simple truth is that this particular fandom is unlikely to accept a reboot. Star Wars is George Lucas's creation, and he had such a strong vision of the franchise that he literally remade the original trilogy using modern technology to better represent his own vision. A full Star Wars reboot would feel like a rejection of Lucas's vision, and many would consider it disrespectful. It's not just a rejection, though. See, for me, it's not just as simple as saying it's a rejection of his vision, all right? It's not just that simple. To reboot Star Wars at this point just simply means that you don't understand George's vision. It's not that you rejected it. You don't understand it and you can't build upon it because you don't understand what it is. All you're doing is just making content. That's it. Again, Star Wars is deeper than just the content. The mythology of what George, let me point out what George Lucas said Star Wars is.
It's based on human behavior, human psychology. Mythology, which is the sort of archaeology of human behavior and thinking. And since it has those motifs, it is very universal, and everybody can relate to it.
It was designed to be a film like mythology of this is what we stand for. You're about to enter the real world. You're 12 years old. You're going to go on into the big world. You're moving away from your parents being the center focus. You're probably scared. You don't know what's going to happen. And here's a little idea of some of the things you should pay attention to. Friendships, honesty, and trust, and doing the right thing, living on the light side, avoiding the dark side. Those are things that it was meant to do.
That's what I'm saying. You just got to keep that mythology element going. George wrote it specifically with an idea in mind. Just keep that idea in mind. Just be creative. Okay. Now, how do we expand the mythology? How do we go further? What other lessons are there to learn that we can continue to explore and push forward? That's what you do. You got to understand his original vision. And then, of course, don't disrespect what came before you. That's where the sequel trilogy got it wrong. They just disrespected everything and they just tried to put a new layer over it and say, this is Star Wars now, instead of saying, no, this is what Star Wars was. This is still Star Wars, and we're not changing what happened in the past. In fact, we're just going to build upon that. That's where they messed up. rather than reboot, then a more likely approach for Star Wars is simply that it continued to expand. That arguably has a stronger creative basis anyway. It allows for stories like Ahsoka that spin out into a different galaxy, while different tones and styles can be integrated into Star Wars through movies like Rogue One and Andor. 100%. You can still use the old stuff and you can expand that, but again, I think you got to go further. You know, you want to explore some stuff back in the Skywalker saga, you know, that's okay, as long as you're not stepping on the original trilogy. But beyond that, I think they're better off just moving further out, you know, finding new characters. They've done this in the past. Like, to say that the Skywalker saga is it, there have been a ton of characters that had nothing to do with the Skywalker saga. The whole Knights of the Old Republic, okay? Some of the video games that have come out, amazing storytelling, okay? Amazing storytelling. But, you know, again, they just want to focus right here. Oh, well, this is all the filmmakers know how to do. The filmmakers need to dig deeper into some of those novels that ended up getting rejected, all right? They need to play the video games, discover the character of Kreia and how cool that character is. And then maybe you'll, you know, understand, wow, I guess the Skywalker saga isn't all there is to Star Wars, that there actually is more to Star Wars than just the Skywalkers. And maybe we need to start exploring that, and maybe we need to start adding to that and creating that instead of trying to just go back and retell that again. You know, again, just a complete lack of creativity that lives in Hollywood. It's a tragedy. I wish Star Wars would get pulled out of Hollywood, go back to an independent studio like Lucasfilm used to be. That was awesome. Anyway, folks, you guys let me know what you think about this whole situation. Should Star Wars be rebooted? I don't think a lot of y'all are going to agree, but if any of y'all disagree, jump down in the comments, give me your thoughts and opinions on that. And thanks for watching. See you next time.